Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We have prepared for you a hopefully transformative discussion on skills-based performance management. So there's about two things that people talk about these days in HR or HR technology. There's AI and there's skills. AI, check, that's done. Now on to skills. Why is everybody talking about skills? Well, many reasons, but one that stands out for me is that the world of work is changing at what really feels like a never accelerating pace. And in that context, the traditional hire for growth model no longer works. So it's critical that employees improve how they manage and develop internal talent. And for that, they need to describe their talent and their needs, and skills just happens to be one of the dictionaries that works well. So here you go, skills. As I was preparing this presentation, I thought about what skills meant for me. And I happened to start my career as a data analyst. And the core skills at the time were what was called data mining. So clearing data, cleaning data, formatting data, manipulating data, and then identifying trends and patterns, building advanced analyses, time series, so on and so forth. A couple of days ago, I had a need to do some data analysis and data mining, and ChatGPT did all what I just described for me. I didn't need these skills. The skills that I needed were AI prompting, analysis interpretation, and at the end of the day, storytelling. So that's just an example of how skills are important as they describe the changing nature of work. And it's important for individuals like employees and managers, but also for organizations to be able to speak that language of skills. My name is Arnaud Grunwald, and I am the Chief Product Officer at Betterworks, been in HR tech for the better part of the last decade. I founded a company in the employee engagement space and then joined Betterworks 4 years ago. And what I do as Chief Product Officer is I spend a lot of time with folks like you, with our customers, with our prospects to understand what is working less in performance management, and what can be done by a software like Betterworks to make performance management more powerful, more intuitive, and more effective. I'm joined by Stacia Garr, a recognized expert in the fields of HR analytics and talent management. Stacia co-founded RedThread Research in 2018, and previously she was with Burson by Deloitte, with CEB, with Gartner. She has an MBA from UC Berkeley, go Bears, and a master's degree from the London School of Economics. So today our mission is to guide you through the why and how of integrating a skills-based approach into performance management. And we'll have three sections. I'll first explore with you the mismatch that there is these days between workforce capabilities and the demands of the job market. Then Stacia will share original findings from RedThread Research on skills, adoption of skills, and how HR has started integrating skills in performance management. And last, I'm really excited. Today I will unveil to the world, to you, our vision with the Betterworks platform to really integrate very tightly skills and performance management in a way that we think will revolutionize how our customers can assess, develop, and leverage talent. So let's start with the elephant in the room, the great skills gap. Across industry, 69% of HR professionals report a tangible gap between the skills their workforce has and the skills required to drive execution, business innovation, business growth. So that, as you can imagine, it's a significant hurdle to scaling operations, entering new markets, and other strategic objectives your company may have. What's more, if you dive deeper into the data, you see that half of these folks who see a skills gap, they actually can't qualify the skill gap. They don't know what skills are missing to the organization, and that's a critical gap. We see it as true in any industries and almost any role. I was thinking of an example as I was preparing this presentation, and I used to work in the healthcare industry, and there are so many trends in the healthcare industry that's been changing the world of work. But the rapid adoption of telehealth, for instance, is something that has created the need for skills such as digital communication and cybersecurity that were not necessarily the hallmarks of the workers in that industry. So a company not realizing this gap, not understanding this gap, would really put their growth in jeopardy, and also would leave the company vulnerable to data breaches or loss of customer trust in the case of cybersecurity. So really important to understand this skills gap in the first place and to understand the reasons of this skills gap. We see three major reasons. So let's start with the silver tsunami. The concept is that baby boomers, which by the way make up nearly 1/3 of the entire workforce, are going to start retiring at record pace, in record numbers. More than 12,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. And of course, since they are in the latter part of their career, a lot of them are in leadership and critical positions. Now, what is worrying is that surveys show that a large portion of these retiring boomers have started to transfer knowledge and skills over to peers and colleagues. So there's really an urgency there for effective knowledge and skill transfer, and also succession planning, as we will talk about later in this presentation. The second generation participating in this skills gap is Gen Zs, also known as Zoomers. And in this section, it's very simple. Gen Zs are coming into the workforce ill-equipped. 37% of them say that their education did not adequately prepare them with either the soft skills or the tech skills that they need for their job. So obvious participation into the great skills gap. Last but not least, tech and AI disruptions. We can't underestimate the impact of technology and AI. Of course, roles are being redefined on a daily basis, right? I'm sure a lot of you are getting these AI newsletters, and every single field is being disrupted. Every single job is changing. So data literacy, AI proficiency is critical for a large portion of the workforce, and it's only going to accelerate. So how does performance management help in this skills transformation? Well, we are a performance management expert, and if you look back at the history of performance management, it has not formally been about skills. There's been a number of transformations and revolutions. 3 decades ago, it was more about top-down performance reviews, the good old-school way of doing performance management. Then it became a more 360 process with gradually more mentoring, more coaching, and then technology helping. The feedback became more real-time on an ad hoc basis when you need it or when you can give it, and more continuous in a way that you didn't have just one performance review, but some companies do quarterly reviews. so that the feedback is not only less biased, but it's more effective. It's more in the moment. But it has not been formally about skills. Now, nevertheless, if you look at each of these phases, for sure you can imagine that people are talking about skills as part of performance management. I receive feedback on skills. I give feedback about skills. I give a performance review to my team members about the skills that they have demonstrated or the skills that they miss. Nevertheless, it's never been formalized in performance management, and we think there is a huge opportunity there. So I will leave it at that and let Stacia present some fascinating insights from RedThread Research before I tell you more about how we at Betterworks envision embedding skills into performance management. Take it away, Stacia.
Thank you so much, Arnaud, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to Betterworks for inviting me to today's event. I am so excited to talk about skills and performance management because I have been researching skills for a number of years and researching performance management for more than a decade. But this is the first opportunity I've had to really bring those two ideas together. And so I am thankful for the chance to be with you here today. Now, as Arnaud mentioned, my name is Stacia Garr, and I'm co-founder of RedThread Research. We are a human capital research advisory analyst firm, and we have a wonderful community of folks who are focused on skills, performance management, learning, DEIB, and people analytics. If you want to continue the conversation after today, I would invite you to join our community, and there's actually a QR code there on the slide which will give you a chance to get a discount on that membership if you just go to that special page. So let's get started. As Arnaud mentioned, the world of skills is one that has been under a lot of discussion recently. And we're going to talk about first, why is that the case? What is it that's got us so excited about skills? We're then going to talk about where skills are fitting into performance management today. And that might be a little bit of a surprise because I just mentioned that skills and performance management have not generally lived together, but we do have some really interesting new data that we're going to share with you. And then the third point we're going to make is around where skills need to fit in the future within performance management and how that might look. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, skills is a topic that everyone's been talking about, but is not actually a new topic. So if you think, back to the very genesis of what a job is somebody doing some work and they have to have some skills to do that work. And so the concept itself is old and we've been looking at it as RedThread Research for a while, but it started to pick up some traction within the last few years due to some changes in things like some of the stuff that Arnaud mentioned, the rise of the silver tsunami, or basically the shift in generational makeup, the increased focus on technology and AI within the last few years, and a number of other things that have meant that we need more talent with certain skills in the workforce where they seem to be less abundant than they have been in the past. Now, a few years ago, Deloitte put out a study that you can see here on the page talking about the skills-based organization being a new operating model. And then last year, McKinsey talked about building a skills-based approach to building the future workforce. So they were very pro-skills. And then just a few weeks ago, the folks over at the Talent Strategy Group released a thought piece on skills that really took the opposite perspective, questioning whether the juice is worth the squeeze when it comes to having a skills-based organization. So really a lot of debate and energy around this topic. But what is interesting is that while we have all this energy, in fact, our research shows that 94% of organizations are at least thinking about skills in some way. Most organizations have not really moved on to doing a lot about this. So if you go to the next slide, you can see here that few organizations actually have a skills strategy. Only 18% have it across the entire company and 17% within specific business units. 43% have no skills strategy at all. And so that can make us say, okay, why the energy, but then the lack of action? And I say that's because of what we call the hope and fear of skills. Now, in this slide, you can see this wonderful Gen AI picture, which kind of encapsulates the darkness and the concern, as well as the opportunity that's out there. So, what is the opportunity? What's the hope? There are three big ideas here. First is around the specificity that skills can enable for us. So, the idea being that if we understand the skills needed for specific work, for roles, and by individuals themselves, we'll be able to make much better talent decisions. If the second area is around mobility, and that is if we understand the skills that people have, we'll be able to understand how they might be able to move in the organization and thus enable them to have better careers and create more flexibility and agility within the work within the organization. The third point is around equity and really enabling people to have better insights and clarity on what the skills are that they're going to need to get to the next level or to change job types so that they can move more freely within organizations and are not reliant on the information or knowledge networks that exist in order to be able to access new opportunities. So that's all on the hope side. And there's a lot of really good things there that can help make organizations more agile and innovative and effective. But if we go to the fear side, there's a lot there too. So the fear, first and foremost, is within the organization and about the organization itself. Organizations tend to be fragmented in terms of their focus, in terms of their communications. And also, for many, they are fatigued and, in fact, I would say fragile. So when I say fragile, we are seeing a rise in focus on mental health. And the people are continuing to say that they're burned out and they are exhausted. And this focus on skills can simply look like another change management effort and something that people don't want to engage in. So that's one fear around the organization. The second fear is around the data itself that skills data represents. And people are saying that it's dispersed, highly dispersed to the organization. And so it's hard to gather together to be able to make good decisions. It's potentially dirty, meaning that we don't know if it's clean, if it's relevant, if it's appropriate. And then third, it's doubted as a result of those things. So can you make good decisions based on this? And that is a question that is giving rise to a focus on things like data validation when it comes to skills, as well as things like recency and frequency and a number of other factors. That's that second fear around data. The third fear is around the technology itself. So the technology that produces a lot of these data are disconnected from each other. And it's hard to know if the information in one system will map to another. It's also been deprioritized in some instances, particularly right now as organizations have gone through budget cuts. And quite frankly, it's downright hard. Some systems just do not talk to each other, and it's hard to get them to be connected. So you might say, okay, Stacia, yes, there's this hope, but that's a lot of problem. That's a lot of difficulty. Is investing in skills even a good investment? Like, is this the way we should go? Should we be doing this? And our data, which you can see on the next slide here, would indicate yes. So this is brand new research, first time that we've shared it. And what we found from this study, which we ran across the fall of last year, is that when organizations have a clear skill strategy, employees are 3.4 times more likely to give a positive NPS score. They're 2 times more likely to report their company is innovative. And all importantly, right now, they're 1.7 times more likely to report their company met its 2023 business goals. So our data would indicate that the juice is, in fact, worth the squeeze when it comes to skills. And you might wonder why. Why is that the case, particularly when 43% of organizations say that they don't even have a skill strategy? So what are these organizations that are doing this? What is working for them? And we've identified that in 3 particular areas on the next slide. The first has to do with alignment. So the alignment element means that you are first creating a clear purpose and scope when it comes to skills. So that means that you have identified how far your skills effort is going to extend. You're going to know how it's going to be designed to support business goals. You'll also have engaged in cross-functional discussions or discussions amongst the organization to understand what skills means to them, what information they need, how they can make better decisions with it, etc. And then finally, within this alignment component, if the organization is going to make an investment in skills technology, there's have to be a lot of questions about the value that it provides and how it feeds into the rest of the HR tech stack. So that can also foster more alignment. A second area here is around decision making. And I want to make a really big, important point here. And that is that skills data are just data. So there's no point in getting ourselves wrapped around the axle about whether we should be a skills-based organization or whatever that is. No one is throwing out competencies. No one is throwing out other data that matters to them. All they're doing is saying that skills data is an important type of data, and we should be augmenting our decision-making with these data. And so we know that generally speaking, when we have more data, we have better decision-making. Also, skills data can put the relevant data in the hands of leaders when it comes to making decisions about who should be in what types of roles, who should be doing what types of projects, types of future development opportunities, etc. And the thing that's really intriguing about skills is that a lot of the energy around it has come from business leaders. So they see the practical need for more data on what their employees are able to do. And they're in many ways pulling that information or pulling HR along to help them build a skills-based strategy. And then finally, it also enables employees themselves to make better decisions so they can understand what their own skills are, what they need to develop, et cetera. And along that line is this creates transparency. And right now, trust in organizations is at some of its lowest levels. If you look at something like the Edelman Trust Index, we can see that people have a high level of distrust right now in business. Creating more transparency, particularly around what it takes to be able to move ahead or move into different roles, is one way to help build up trust. And we know that when there's greater trust and transparency, employees tend to be more engaged, which can tend to lead to higher levels of productivity. So this is why we see making an investment in skills as being a good choice. The data support it. This whole element of creating greater alignment, better decision-making, and transparency can also help drive businesses forward. So let's now bring this into the context of performance management with the question, where do skills fit within performance management? So if you've been following the skills discussion like I have, you may have noticed that skills are not really talked about in the context of PM. It's almost in some weird way like they don't exist. But it turns out actually, and this is some of our new data that we're most excited about, that when you dig into it, skills are already deeply embedded in performance practices and specifically within performance assessment. So if we look at the next slide, you can see some of this new data. We asked our survey respondents how they assess employees within performance assessment. And you can see here on the slide that there's typical, what you'd expect, job responsibilities and business goals as the first two items. But then competencies and skills are actually both at 45% of organizations. So nearly half of organizations today are assessing employees based on the skills that they're demonstrating on the job. So this is not really a new thing per se, but what happens with that skills data is an important question. And today, most of it just stays in the performance management system. So we're assessing, we understand skills, but they're living over here. So we then asked a slightly different question, and that's over here on the next slide, which was around skills validation. We asked leaders how they validate if someone has a skill. And the top method, performance feedback. So this is super interesting because in the skills world, everyone is talking about and debating whether, for instance, self-assessment is the way to go on one side of the spectrum and formal assessment on the other side of the spectrum. But interestingly, neither of those are as common as performance feedback. And that's not what we tend to be hearing people say. And the reason for that is that the way it goes down is like this. When an organization rolls out its skills effort, they will ask managers, as well as often employees, to assess if they have a skill. And managers will reflect on the performance feedback that they've given the employee, and they'll say, yep, they have that skill, or nope, they don't have that skill. And so it's not a formal assessment per se, but it's more the manager's opinion based on the performance that they've seen. So it's in this kind of gray area, but it's not really as validated feedback as it could be. But the point being that skills are already within performance assessment and validation is already happening based on performance feedback. So skills are already within the performance process, which is in many ways good news. These are data that we can use to make better decisions. But it turns out, though, that this is not where we should stop, because skills in assessment isn't enough. Because when we ask folks what they want to do with skills data, and that's on this next slide, they say things like coaching and development and recruiting. And actually, if we code them, what they're actually saying is we want to use skills data for performance management. We want to help employees find learning. We want to identify skills gaps. We want to do learning needs identification, input for promotion, et cetera, et cetera. But many of these things are actually developmental, not assessment when it comes to skills. So we're using skills for assessment, but we're not really using the skills data for development, which is problematic. And it's even more problematic when we look at the data on this next slide, which shows that, according to our data, that skills development is down. And these are some pretty significant numbers. So if you look at that first item, my organization helps me identify the skills I need to succeed in the future. There's a 16 percentage point decline since 2021. So a really big difference in terms of employees' perceptions that their organization is helping them identify the skills they need to succeed. The next one down, my organization encourages employees to continuously learn and develop skills. That's a 7 percentage point decline. So basically, employees are saying that they are not getting the development that they need in order to get to the places that they are required or trying to get to. And it gets worse, unfortunately, when we look at the older generation. So we cut this by 25 to 44-year-old, 45 to 54, and 55 plus. And what we find is that those older workers in particular are saying that they're not getting the help they need to identify the skills that they need to succeed in the future or to continually learn and develop. And you might say, okay, well, that's not necessarily such a big deal because these folks are going to be aging out of the workforce. But that's not entirely true because people are working longer than ever before. And somebody, let's say, who's just barely in that group, let's say they're just 55 years old, they might be in the workforce till they're 70 or a little bit higher even. And so if they're feeling like they're not getting what they need to succeed, we're not going to be able to use that workforce to help us close the skills gap that we have right now in organizations. So you might be wondering what's happening here. Why are we saying that there's this great energy and focus on skills, but organizations aren't investing? They're not supporting employees in these ways. We think there are a few reasons that this is happening. The first is in nearly every study that we're running right now, we've been hearing about how organizations are focused on maximizing productivity, which has meant that learning has been squeezed in the flow of work. If you're focused on maximizing productivity, you're not creating time to experiment and to learn and to take on new skill building. You're focused on productivity and getting the work out. The second reason is that we've been relying on managers to do a lot of the skills identification and development historically. But managers' jobs have gotten so much harder in the last 5 years, and they don't have the time and support to do that work these days. And so managers themselves are able to support employees much less than they have before, particularly within the flow of work. And then finally, skills hasn't been adequately connected into performance management. So skills has been seen as a learning thing over here, not a performance thing, not a thing that we need to focus on to be able to do the job better. So that's why we think we're seeing this odd disconnect. But there's lots of room and opportunity to integrate skills into performance management. So on this slide, you can see the performance management behaviors we expect of workers. So at a high level, we expect them to plan their work, we expect them to perform their work, and we expect them to learn in order to do their work. And if we move on to the next slide, you can see the sub-items underneath that highlighted in gray, where we show the performance management behaviors where skills are already integrated. So in some instances, we see skills being integrated in setting goals. We see it certainly in assessing performance, as we talked about. Some organizations are using skills as part of providing regular feedback, and sometimes they're doing it to leverage enablement tools. So you need help doing XYZ thing. Here are some tools and resources to do that. But as you can see from this page, there are all sorts of areas where those performance management behaviors could have skills more integrated. So for instance, on aligning goals across a team. So maybe if you identified that skills are needed in high numbers in a particular team, the same skills, well, maybe you might want to think about the mixture of people who are on that team and whether the team itself has the skills necessary to achieve the goals and objectives. You could also be looking at this when you're thinking about how do you revise goals. So that's under the perform element. Thinking through, okay, this person's not actually meeting their goals, or they're behind, or we might have to adjust the goals. Why is that? Does it come back to skills? Does it come back to they may not have the skills they need to do the job? Right now, skills just kind of tend to sit over here in a lot of these conversations. And we think they need to be more heavily integrated right into the work that people are doing. So as you're moving forward and thinking about skills in performance management together, I have 3 key questions for you. The first one is, will the performance data on skills be captured in any skills data set you have? So for instance, if you have a skills data lake, are you going to be taking the performance management data and putting the data on skills into that lake? And if so, how will that skills data be used? Will it be used for development only, or for making workforce decisions such as decisions around internal talent mobility, for strategic workforce planning calculations, or for making just general future workforce decisions? So be clear on how you plan to use those skills data. The second question is, how will skills data from your performance practices be connected to learning? So the skills data should not just live out there. If you know that somebody needs to develop skills, there should be a connection to learning opportunities, and well as an awareness that that person needs to be developing those skills within the flow of the work that they do, but making sure that that's very clear and people know what they should be working on. And then third, how will you make the skills data you capture in your performance practices useful to employees? So these are not data that should be kept by the organization. Employees will not give you skills data if there's no what's in it for me. And so being clear on what's the value that they're going to get, and then also clearly communicating to employees how those data will be used, is a really important part of connecting skills and performance management. So just wrapping up, if we're going to pull it all together, here's what I was shared with you all today. First and foremost, skills are hot. Skills are interesting. There's a lot of debate on them, but most organizations lack a strategy. That said, we find that organizations that do have a strategy tend to perform better. And the reason for that is because having a skill strategy can help you foster alignment, enable better decision-making, and create more transparency in the organization, which can lead to greater engagement and productivity. Third point, skills data are just data. They are an augmentation of data, that should be combined with other data to drive better decision making in the organization. There should not be a debate about becoming a skills-based organization, and you should not be throwing out other data because you're focusing on skills in addition to other things. Fourth point, skills are in the performance appraisal process in many organizations today. And that may be the case in your organization already. You should make sure you understand that. And if it is the case, you should have a clear strategy on how you're going to use those data. And finally, there are lots of places within your performance practices where skills could be added, particularly in terms of that connection to learning. So thank you so much for the time today, for listening and going on this journey around how skills and performance management are connected. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Arnaud.
Thank you, Stacia. Amazing data, amazing insights, and I'm super excited because it matches really well with what we're hearing from our customers and the vision and roadmap that we have put in place accordingly. We believe, like you do, that skills are the great connector, the common thread that will tie it all, performance, talent management, learning. And if I take the slide that I showed before your presentation about the evolution of performance management, for us at BetterWorks, we think the skills-based performance management is the next step of performance management. It is not ditching everything, all the great evolution that has happened in the past. It is building on top of it, right? 360 feedback, coaching, mentoring, real-time feedback, continuous performance management, check-ins, so on and so forth are very beneficial to employees, managers, and the overall organization. But we think that skills-based performance management will transform it into a more powerful, more efficient tool. Why is that? So first of all, I think, in my team, we have an acronym called the WIVM, the what's in it for me, for the employee. And I think that by bringing skills in a more formal way into performance management, the rhythm will increase significantly. And I'm saying in a formal way because, as you said, Stacia, skills are already hidden in feedback, hidden in peer reviews, hidden in my developmental goals and the recognitions that I get and other performance management data. But if you formalize it, if you make it more obvious, if you make it easier to see for the manager, for the employee, for the HR business partners, it's going to make performance conversations much more valuable, much more precise, much more targeted. It's going to make employee development more powerful in a way that is aligned with career aspirations on one hand and organizational strategic objectives on the other hand. It's going to boost career pathing because employees are going to understand from these career conversations, development conversations that they're having with their managers, with their coaches in BetterWorks, for instance, how skill development will get them to the next step in their career. So that's for the employee. For the manager, we think the value will be tremendous, but also for the organization, right? Once you have all this data and collecting this data, we have this data, but it's really normalizing, structuring this performance data into skills data will help with talent mobility, with talent development strategy, with workforce planning. I'm not going to delve too much on these because you covered some of these benefits in your presentation. But what I like in the slide is to say skills-based performance management will benefit everyone. It's not a new thing that is imposed on one persona of the process to benefit the other, right? It will benefit everyone in that there will be more clarity, less bias for the employee. There will be an easier way of carrying out career conversations or giving feedback for managers, and there will be better data to make better decisions at the HR business partner level, at the CHR level, and even at the business leader level. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we have in mind. I think we feel very fortunate to sit on a gold mine of data. We know so much about employees. We know so much about managers. These are some of the modules and associated data sets that come straight from a performance management system like BetterWorks. We have engagement data, employee surveys, employee polls that we analyze quantitatively and qualitatively. We have people's goals and how they track their goals over time, and the commentary that they leave on their goals or that other people leave on their goals, the one-on-ones that they have with their managers or with their peers to discuss these goals or to discuss other matters at hand. We have peer feedback or manager feedback or skip level feedback, a whole range of ad hoc and continuous feedback data that is very often unstructured data, text data, that is amazing to receive and that we are already taking major steps to use AI to summarize. But we need to go the extra step and normalize it, especially when it comes to skills. Same for recognition data, same for check-ins and reviews data. It's all a type of feedback. And then calibration data, we know how managers tend to rate their team members and the ones that tend to be on the bullish side, on the bearish side, and how these gaps are being resolved as a team. So a tremendous data set that is full of skills, as we've been saying. And what we envision to do is to use this data set to really build a comprehensive talent profile that aggregates external data sources, because we don't know it all at BetterWorks. We just have a very special performance management data. So aggregating HRIS data, other external sources, maybe talent marketplace or learning management system data, but to marry that with performance data to present a, let's say, holistic view of each employee's skills and potentials. And I really like this word, evidence. Through our AI, we at BetterWorks can run AI continuously. We can crunch AI algorithms, generative AI algorithms, on a continuous basis as data is being collected. And we will identify and detect skills in these unstructured data that I described. And we will expose that to the employee, to the manager in very simple and intuitive ways to interact with. I will show you screenshots. But basically, instead of having to believe the employee for self-declaring a skill, or to believe the manager who might be very friendly on assessing and validating a skill for the employee, we are building a multi-source system of evidence that will prove the existence of a skill for one given individual, or that will prove the need for a skill for one individual. So someone might, let's say a marketing specialist whose proficiency in digital advertising needs to be validated, and just happens that in BetterWorks we have project outcomes, we have course completions, we have peer endorsements, and so we will have this multi-source system that provides a comprehensive view of that skill and makes it much easier to put a thumbs up next to that skill. So that's what we're very excited to use AI for, and as a result, this talent profile will be the building block for a bunch of talent mobility applications. We will start with succession planning. But we are already working on workforce planning, career pathing, development opportunities. I don't like the term development planning. I really think today is about opportunities, about knowing which skills, which experiences you need to acquire, and being on the lookout in the company where everything is changing very quickly for opportunities to develop and progress. So, ta-da! This is the first time I talk about our upcoming BetterWorks talent profile. We've been very busy building this holistic talent profile that is dynamic, that is AI enhanced, and literally continuously updates with new skills, new experience, new achievements. It would be built, as I said, from external sources and BetterWorks data sources. So external, think your feed from Workday, your LinkedIn profile, your resume, courses from a learning management system, etc. And again, we will use AI to identify, to normalize skills and to expose that evidence for the skills and make it easy for the employee. As you can see at the bottom, and I'll have a zoom into this on the next slide, we're using AI to recommend skills to an employee if critical thinking or cross-functional collaboration or time management has been talked about in the performance management data. Sometimes it's a skill I have, so I can say I have this in one click. Sometimes it's a skill I want to further develop, and so I can click on develop this, and it goes into the list of skills that I want to develop, creating that transparency with peers and with my manager as to what opportunities I would benefit from. And last but not least, I'm really excited about bringing skills in BetterWorks, not only for the identification portion of it, but also because we are the quintessential skill development planning and execution platform. That's what we do all day. We let people set their goals, have conversations about these goals, get feedback about these goals. So we will apply that to skills. So if I have advanced prototyping in the skills I want to develop as a UX designer, as Nicola here on the slide, I can set a goal for myself, a developmental goal to work on advanced prototyping with milestones. And I can have conversations with my skip level manager, for instance, about how I'm doing about that, get feedback from my peers. And that feedback will be surfaced automatically and participate in the validation of that skill until I can move that skill from skills I want to develop to skills I have. Using AI is critical because some of the big challenges that our customers are struggling with other skills-based platform is one, adoption, right? You can't ask an employee to build a skills profiles from scratch and literally guessing from a long list in a drop-down which skills they have and they don't have. So we use AI to identify, but not only identify, but also normalize according to a set dictionary of skills, what they have or what they might want to be able to work on. And we're making it, I told my UX designer team, making it like a Tinder process, right? It's swipe right or swipe left. So one single click to take on a skill or dismiss the recommendation. And then, as I said a little bit earlier, we are using AI to validate the skills proficiency because we are aggregating and analyzing multiple sources of evidence. So you can see the second screenshot here where evidence has been found in my LinkedIn profile, in 4 feedbacks, in a check-in with my manager that I have the skill. That makes it much easier for the manager to validate that skill. So AI is absolutely critical. Without AI, there would be way too much friction to creating talent profiles. And the second thing I want to announce today is that at the same time we're working on the talent profile, we are also working on talent mobility. We know talent mobility is a big problem. Organizations need to optimize the way they use their current resources, and they don't have the time or the opportunity anymore to hire for growth. They need to reskill, upskill their current workforce. We're starting with succession planning because it's a critical board level process, but we will very quickly extend it into a broader mobility planning across the organization. What we're doing for succession planning is we're bringing a process that is today still in Excel worksheets for many of our customers to the cloud in a way that is structured, that is clearly documented in terms of the criteria, that the decisions that were made, and we'll use AI to suggest non-obvious candidates. The types of customers that we serve have sometimes more than 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 of employees in their organizations. So while there are obvious successors to a given job, the top performing direct report, for instance, maybe there is a rising star in Germany who is willing to relocate and become a VP in a Southeast Asia country. And we would have never known if AI hadn't connected the dots. So that's how we will be using AI for talent mobility in a first phase, and I'm sure there's going to be more AI use cases. And as I said earlier, the beauty of Betterworks is that we know how to develop someone or something. We have goals, we have conversations, we have feedback. So with Betterworks succession planning, the process will no longer be just a contingency plan. It will be a strategic tool. It will not be a destination. It will be part of a loop, so that when someone has been named as a candidate for a given succession, a development plan is being documented. Someone is owning it. Someone is accountable for it. And we're going to make sure that that candidate gets to ready now when they need to be ready now. Many of our customers tell us we do succession planning all the way to development plan, but it's collecting virtual dust on a virtual shelf. And when the position becomes open, we end up hiring someone from outside. That makes no sense. That means that the entire succession planning idea is not working. So I want to wrap it up by showing this slide again. It's our holistic approach, integrating skills across the spectrum of performance and talent management. It's really that common thread that ties it all together, from goal alignment, performance feedback, workforce planning, career pathing. It all makes sense, and it has been missing until now because there is no normalization, no structuring of the skills data in performance management, and we are doing that. So we are very excited to capitalize on this huge opportunity that will benefit everyone. So thank you. It's been great, Stacia. Thank you so much for all your insights. I hope we have demonstrated the transformative potential of a skills-based approach to performance management. I wish that together with all of you, we embrace this evolution and unlock the full potential of our talent. So thank you for your time and engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you.